Please can I test my audio? I think you're saying you can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Licensing Committee. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies for absences from Councillor Barnett, Councillor Lewis and Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Everybody agreed with the minutes? Can I confirm that I can sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of October? Agreed? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests and non-pecuniary interests they may have with respect to matters which are to be considered at this meeting. Members who consider they have an interest are invited to consult the monitoring officer or the democratic service officer prior to the meeting. Any interests? Thank you. Item 4, private hire. Is that you, Paul?
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this report is to consider the proposed revised private hire fees post-consultation. The Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 includes provisions that allows the Council to recover such fees as they consider reasonable to recover the cost of issuing and administering taxi and private hire licences. Oh, yeah. It's all wet there. How's that? Better? Do you want me to go back over that bit? Do you want me to go back over the first bit? Would you like me to go back over the first bit? No. In calculating additional costs, we have taken into account the Local Government Association's guidance, which indicates what we are allowed to include. In October 2022, the Licensing Committee considered a report which set the proposed fees and charges for private hire operator licences and resolved that a public consultation could commence. These were private hire operator licences for more than one vehicle only. 2 responses were received, both from existing private hire operators. The queries raised were unrelated to the item under consultation and answered satisfactorily by myself, the Senior Licensing Officer. As a result, we are proposing the revised fees in Annex A of the report are adopted from the 1st of April 2023. It is likely that proposed revised fees based on cost recovery would generate an income in line with current budget estimates for taxi licensing 23-24, assuming the existing level of licensable activity. The demand for licences will vary over time. The Licensing Committee is asked to resolve that the contents of the report be noted and the proposed revised fees and charges be recommended for approval by the head of HR, it's not the head of HR, by the head of Environment and Community and with the Strategic Director of Environment and Community in consultation with the Strategic Director of Finance and the Finance Portfolio Holder. Thank you, Chairman. Any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Page 12. I'm interested in where this figure of £865 comes from. Can you explain how that figure was arrived at? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapper. We had a methodology which we which was used to revise all the fees and charges the previous year. And we used the same methodology to calculate the 5-year fees. We were aiming to get it a little bit lower just to make it a bit more attractive, and it turned out at 865. So it's based on the amount of time it takes to conduct checks at private hire operators. Operators with more than one vehicle, there are considerably more checks to make. They've got more staff, more vehicles, and generally more vehicle movements.
It just seems a bizarre relationship to the cost of the 1 year licence fee. It's a discount of something like 21.73%, which just seemed bizarre. I would have expected a round figure like 20% or something like that. And so I'm just interested in but fine, if there's a methodology behind it, I'm happy to go with that. Thank you.
Yes, there is a methodology, and yeah, it was considered, and it's the same one we use now for all fees and charges going forward.
So we're asked to resolve that the proposed private hire operator fees as shown in Annex A be recommended for approval by the Strategic Director, Environment and Community, the Strategic Director of Finance and the Finance Portfolio Holder. The proposed fees to come in effect from April 2023. Are you all agreed? Thank you. Item 5. Taxi licensing convictions policy. Is that Paula? Paula.
Thank you, Chairman. So the review of taxi and private hire assessment of previous convictions. Surrey Heath Borough Council adopted the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy on the 2nd of August 2021. Part of the policy is the relevance of convictions and other related information. In July 2020, the Department for Transport published the Statutory Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Standards under the Policing and Crime Act 2017. Part of that statutory guidance was the assessment of convictions, which can be seen at Annex B. A comparison has been made between the DFT's assessment of previous convictions and Surrey Heath's existing relevance of convictions policy, and new guidance has been drafted. Any major changes have been written in red to make it easier to see. The guidance, if approved, will be renamed Taxi and Private Hire Licensing Assessment of Previous Convictions. The nationally set assessment of previous convictions aim to ensure that there is a consistent approach to assessing both new driver or renewal applicants' fitness and propriety. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. I do actually have a few questions on this. So, and then none of them are the items in red, which I'm quite happy with, but it's actually the other wording, or some of the other wording, I just want to query. So if I start on page 24 and paragraph 8.2, it says, in regard to consideration may be given of at least 7 years since the completion of any sentence following conviction for an offence shown below, and it refers to obstruction. Now, there are lots of different types of obstruction, so I'm not quite sure what type of obstruction it means, because if I go on to the next page, on page 86, and look at paragraph 15.3, it says traffic offences such as obstruction will not ordinarily merit refusal. So I think we probably just need to clarify, we're talking of obstruction of the police or whatever. We're certainly not talking of obstruction of the road, because that's covered 2 pages later. And just, I suppose, just to be clear about that. Again, that may have just been a carryover from the previous policy, but I think it probably just needs, I suspect it's probably obstruction of the police, but I may not be quite correct in that. If I go on to 17.3, which is on page 27, and I hope I'm not being overly pedantic here, but if it's on the second line, it does say the word which suggests he could be a danger to the public. And whilst it's certainly true the vast majority, perhaps not all of them, may be male, there may occasionally be female drivers who could possibly be a danger to the public. I hope that's not taken as a gender comment, but it's just the reality of life, I'm afraid. My main concern, though, is regarding paragraph 17. And this is such a sensitive area, and I do know, as you'll appreciate from my previous time as the chair, that this that this is actually quite a careful area to be mindful of. I entirely agree that that the public have a right to be protected, and that questions relating to findings in court and all that sort of thing absolutely have got to be taken on board, and there are time frames regarding how long all the years should elapse and things like that, and that's absolutely right. I do, however, have a concern regarding non-conviction information. I've gone back to the guidance to have a look at this, and I don't think it's close, but it's not. There's some very subtle changes to the guidance to this policy, in my opinion, anyway, regarding information on here. And so, if I look at 17.1, the first area that we're kind of thinking about here is information regarding acquittals. Now, I have to express some concern about that, because that is where there's been a finding in court that somebody is not guilty of the offence. Now, if they're not guilty of the offence, I'm not sure why we are then suggesting we take that into evidence to possibly remove their licence. Now, it is true that under the guidance that we have, and I'm sure Mrs. Barnes will repeat this in a moment, but the question that's within the guidance, I will repeat for you, has come up in training, is without any prejudice and based on the information before you, would you allow a person for whom you care, regardless of their condition, to travel alone in a vehicle driven by this person at any time of the day or night? So I guess the reason why this is in there is there may have been some concern about a behaviour that was not of a nature that related to an offence, but is nonetheless concerning and should be taken into consideration. The problem is that although that sentence is in the guidance, it is at odds with other aspects of the guidance. So specifically, it is at odds with page 12. Sorry, this is going to sound really technical, but I only had a chance to look at this last night, otherwise I've gone to officers. And if I read paragraph 4.4 of the guidance, it's not in your papers, it says, and I directly quote, "It should be noted that licensing authorities must not circumvent the DBS process and seek to obtain details of previous criminal convictions and other information that may not otherwise be disclosed on a DBS certificate." Now that's clearly in here, so we can't get information that would not be disclosed. So we have to be careful in terms of disclosed information from the police. Now, the way around this is to take into account what's called additional police information. You can tell I'm a safeguarding officer in some charities, can't you? But you can take that into account. So that is where, in effect, the police, someone submits a DBS and the police, there hasn't been, it may be going through the courts or it may be of information that the police want you to be aware of. It's absolutely right that we take that into account because that's information that the police have told us formally and we are reasonably able to take that into account. An acquittal, however, is the opposite, in my opinion. That is where a finding of fact has occurred and that person is not guilty. Now, that's different to information in other findings. So I'm personally uncomfortable regarding the acquittals aspect. I do agree about the other areas, about not to prosecute persons where it's arrested and bailed and not charged. I would slightly have an issue with where it says complaints from the public, because the wording in the guidance is a high number of complaints, not complaints. So again, there's a definition of what we mean by high number, but it doesn't mean one. Or it doesn't say it in here, and I did want to double check on that because I know we've had training on it which suggested something else, but that isn't what this guidance suggests, at least not from my reading of it. It does refer to high number of complaints from the public, which then may bring in behaviour and may bring this into doubt. So I accept this is a bit of a minefield. I agree that we have to implement the guidance, which has been poorly worded, in my opinion, in certain areas. And this is the one that I think is the most sensitive. Everything else I entirely agree with. But on this area, there's a balance because people also have the legal right to ensure that they're treated fairly. And that means in terms of what information is known by others and what information is not. So I just wanted to kind of flag that. I'm sorry that's so technical for those who perhaps aren't knowledgeable about safeguarding, but it is something I just think we need to be cautious of in terms of the wording, and perhaps ask that, whilst I'm comfortable this goes through, I do think those areas need to be reviewed in accordance with the guidance as is.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Yes, we'll go back and look at that statement. I think regarding acquittals, definitely, you know, maybe we'll go back and have another pass at that section. With your reference to complaints, it depends, I think, on what the complaint was for. You know, a complaint regarding bad driving, you know, one complaint we wouldn't, but if it was a complaint about, you know, abuse or racism, you know, that gives us serious doubts as to the particular driver's ability to continue being fit and proper. And I can't remember the other question. Sorry.
I'm not used to sitting here, so you can tell I haven't done the training course for this microphone. But I'm trying to find the exact wording of it, but I wrote it down here. I think the wording in the guidance is... Oh, have you? Okay, so I would love to point you to the page, but I haven't got it in front of me. I think the wording is patterns of behaviour such as complaints against drivers. So it's patterns of behaviour and complaints rather than complaint. Now, that I agree with you that there may be a serious complaint that is investigated by the police. They decide not to take any action. They decide they don't wish to formally report anything on the DBS. That puts us potentially in an issue, but according to this guidance, I don't think we can take it into account. Now, you may disagree, but I'm looking at this and I don't think we can. I think if there's two, we can, but when there's only one, but again, I suspect that's poor wording from here, but that's kind of how I'm reading it. And it wouldn't necessarily be against the rules either, because, as I say, the government now are trying to get this balance right about confidentiality and protection, and it's such a tough one to get right. But that's where I think they're kind of trying to land this.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the acquittals, and obviously we've got Rebecca on online, so she can comment and correct me if I'm wrong. But I mean, in terms of acquittals, that may be acquittal, and that needed to be proved beyond reasonable doubt, and there may not have been evidence to prove that. But for our considerations, it's on the balance of probabilities. So the fact that they didn't secure a conviction and they were acquitted, that doesn't mean that there may not be circumstances that, as a licensing authority, we should still take into account, obviously considering each application on its merits and any other information that we may hold, or, you know, if there was a pattern of behaviour, other complaints. But I don't think we could discount that information, but Rebecca may wish to comment from a legal point of view.
Thanks, Francis. Yeah, there is a different burden of level of proof there, but also I think it's to do with the nature of the offence. So I seem to recall, I can check it now, I think it might be offences of a sexual nature that are treated slightly differently here. So it wouldn't be acquittals for something that's under the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. You know, it would have to be a very serious offence.
Would you like to come back?
I'm so sorry to cut, because there should be more of a debate on this. You're right, there is a difference in burden of proof. And so I guess in theory that could arise. But there is a big caution around this, I think, and we would probably want to reflect that in the wording. Because under such circumstances, the police may not declare information to us formally. And we are entitled to refer to the DBS ourselves if it's thought, for example, under that example, an individual, and I'm using paragraph 4.15, an individual has harmed or poses a risk of harm to a child or vulnerable adult. or an individual has satisfied the harm test, received a caution or conviction, and those, so there may be, again, what it's trying to formalise information that we can reasonably take into account, and that which is, to be blunt, hearsay. Now, it may be that information has come available in a court of law, and the person's been not convicted, or acquitted, I should say, but we still need some way of recording that in order to, in effect, not judge that person twice and not go through a process which, in essence, they have... I hope you understand what I'm trying to say with this, but there is a fairness issue, and we have to be very cautious not to breach natural justice when looking at such, hopefully, very, very, very limited number of cases.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Bates. Yes, I take your point fully. We will go back and have a look at number 17, non-conviction information, and reword it. Yeah, I will come back.
Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Chair. I think we need to be careful here that we are not limiting our concerns to just legal breaking in the law of the land, if you like, and having police prosecutions. We're talking about here of judging people who are suitable under our licensing conditions. And if somebody's making, as you say, sexual advances to his passengers, and somebody can, that may not be a police offence that they can be prosecuted for, but it's certainly not the behaviour we want to encourage when we grant a licence. So maybe the answer is to leave it as it is, but give some right of appeal. So at least as a second, if the driver concerned doesn't like the decision made by the officers, at least they've got a right of appeal to somebody who again looks at the evidence and makes a final decision. I just don't think we need to be as strong as being suggested, because that could work against the interests of what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Yes, we do have, obviously, we do take other information, that's what this is referring to, into account, and it could be, most of the time it's the police and the DBS certificate, but it could be complaints, officers' observations, obviously, and then if a decision to refuse a licence or revoke a licence is made, that person then has the right to appeal to magistrates' court, and then the magistrates will come along and defend our position, and then they'll obviously appeal that they either want their licence unrevoked, reinstated, or unsuspended.
Councillor Tapper?
Thank you, Chair. Can we please bear in mind that this document is actually entitled Taxi and Private Hire Licensing Assessment of Previous Convictions. If we're now broadening our review of the driver's suitability, maybe we need to look at the wording of the description of this document, because what we're delving into here is things which are beyond just convictions. Thank you.
Any further questions? Sorry, thought it was on. The committee is asked to resolve that the taxi and private hire assessment of previous convictions, Annex A, be approved. Can I have a show of hands, please?
Having reviewed, because having had a bit of experience with DBS as well, I have the same concerns that Councillor Bates has.
Well,
I'm happy to approve it with that bit looked at.
so we want an amendment, yes?
Certainly to be looked at and possibly rewritten, or at least be looked at and come back, because I have the same issues about the football area.
Well, I was going to ask if you were mindful that should we request that it comes back to the next committee once it's been redone, if you feel strongly enough.
Chairman, personally, I'm quite happy for it to go forward, but based on the understanding that officers relook at that paragraph. Now, I'm also happy, if it helps, because I don't necessarily think it needs to come back here, and obviously many of us won't be here anyway. So I would suggest that perhaps if there was any wording, it's delegated to yourself and the Vice Chair to just agree any wording. The rest of this policy is excellent. It's just that specific section, I think, is the one that we just want to double check. At least that's where I am. I don't know.
If you go away and say, actually, everything, we've looked at it and we're happy with the wording, then that's obviously a message I just want it would be good to go away. But
Okay, yeah, I agree.
And what was, so we're going to approve it with the amendments as,
Well,
or change?
Review.
we'll have a look at, we'll review paragraph 17, and then if you agree, Chair, Vice Chair, we'll come back to you with the amended wording.
Is everybody happy with that? All agreed? Oh, yes. Yeah. Trading report.
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this report is to ask the committee to approve, post-consultation, the draft street trading policy that's attached at Annex 1 to the report, and for it to take effect from the 1st of April 2023. The committee considered the draft policy at their last meeting and approved it for consultation. The policy sets out how the Council will consider applications for street trading consents under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, and the objective of the policy is to encourage street trading that provides customer choice, contributes to the character of the locality, but whilst preventing any possible nuisance and disorder and ensuring public safety. The draft policy has been widely consulted on via the Council's website and social media, and by means of direct consultation with the stakeholders listed in Annex 3. The results of the consultation are detailed in Section 2 of the report, and minor changes have been made to the draft policy in light of these, and these are shown in red in the policy. The changes relate, in summary, to more specific reference under highway safety with regard to advertising and illuminated signage, clarification of the arrangements for consulting on applications and for considering alternative town centre sites in future, and for coordinating street trading on town centre market days. The committee has also asked to approve the new street trading designation resolution, which was proposed at the last meeting. The new resolution increases the council's control over street trading in the borough by designating all streets that are not on the list of prohibited streets for trading as streets that require a consent to trade. The comments of the committee at their last meeting have been reflected in the revised list of prohibited streets, which involve removing the Square, Bagshot, Dean Parade and the Heather Ridge Arcade from the prohibited list. As required under the Act, the intention to pass the resolution has been publicised in a local newspaper and the police and highways notified. The required consent from highways has been obtained. Following approval of the resolution by the committee, a further public notice to this effect will be required. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Garrett.
Sorry, I pressed marks. I apologise. Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. The first one, reference 5.1.1, consultees. Investment and development. Is that the economic development team? There's obviously nothing in that. It's all water. Is that the economic development team?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. It's just I wasn't quite sure from that wording. And just to, as I was on that page, I noticed the council cannot issue a consent if the applicant is under 17. Is there a particular reason why it's 17?
That's in the legislation.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Any further questions? The committee is advised to resolve that the revised draft street trading policy at Annex 1 is approved to take effect from the 1st of April 2023, and 2, the revised street designation resolution contained in the public notice shown at Annex 2 is approved to take effect from the 1st of April 2023, and the approval is publicised by means of a further public notice for 2 consecutive weeks in a local newspaper. Are we all agreed?
I'll say something I've said before, and I will say it again. And you know what I'm going to say.
I do.
Why are we spending money to put something in a newspaper when no one reads newspapers?
Because the legislation
I know the
says so.
legislation says it.
Publicised
Well,
in
last
the
time I brought this up
newspaper.
with Gavin, he suggested that just because the legislation suggests it, it doesn't mean in that particular instance we need to do it. So I'd be happy if you could look at it, because I could be wrong, but very, very few people read the local newspapers these days. They are more likely to see it on social media than they are on the newspaper. And it's taxpayers' money that we're using to stick it in a paper that no one will read. I know that we've always done it, and every time we have the conversation, I'm going to keep bringing it up.
I know there was one instance where
Yeah.
we did check the legislation and it didn't have to be in a,
Yeah.
it didn't
Is
actually say in a local
yeah.
newspaper, so we didn't
Can
do
we
it.
possibly do that again? I know it's been pernickety.
I did check and it does specify local newspaper, but I'm happy to speak to legal, and if there is a way we can
Okay.
avoid doing that, happy to do so.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for being pernickety.
The only thing is, if it is in the local newspaper, regardless of whether anybody reads it or not, you have got the backup. Well, I never saw it, you never showed me. And you can actually say, well, yes, it was in this paper, and here's the evidence. With social media, it is more popular, but I think it's more difficult to prove that you have done what you're supposed to do. So whilst I agree entirely with you, I think if it says the local paper, then we must go ahead. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I think it's still a case that not absolutely everybody is on social media. There are still some that are, and I suppose we have to be belt and braces with these things. So, unfortunately, yes, it's an extra cost, but and the local newspapers are declining rapidly, but there we are. Thank you.
Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest perhaps that this is a prime example of something which maybe we could address locally for those people who are not on social media, for instance, by way of providing a notice that can be put up on the council's public notice board in those wards that actually have council public notice boards. At the moment, the council one is just used for a generic A1 size poster that completely fills that, but perhaps we could think about sending them out and posting them on the local notice boards, and then people would be able to see them in those circumstances that they don't have the local paper and they don't do social media. They can at least see it publicly displayed. Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask, is this published on our own website? It is.
Yes.
I think most people who are traders are fairly savvy with the internet and what have you. We're not talking about little old ladies where they're not going to set up a street trading operation, are they? So I think most people will go to the council website and see what the rules are, and that's the most logical place to see it.
Could we not put it in Heathseen, because isn't that supposed to go to every property? So anybody living in any of the roads will know what is, oh, that fella's putting up a tent, why is he, should he, and knows to get into contact with us.
We'll happily look at ways of publicising.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Hi. Just to say, to add a comment to that, sometimes the supermarkets have a free publication if it is in the locality and there's supermarkets. That's one way to get it out.
Thank you. Right. Okay, so we've all agreed, and we're going to look at the how we publicise it.
yeah.
Thank you. Right, item 7, verbal annual update on the work of the EDH and licensing services, and I think that's you, Francis.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm pleased to provide the committee with an update on the work undertaken by Environmental Health and Licensing over the last year. As members are aware, this work relates to a wide range of statutory functions, primarily aimed at protecting public health and safety, environmental control, prevention of crime and disorder, and protecting the vulnerable. With the removal of the team's COVID business restriction enforcement and contact tracing duties in 2022, the work of the Environmental Health and Licensing team has refocused on core areas of work. Under licensing, as this committee will be well aware, environmental health and licensing officers are responsible for licensing, registering or consenting a wide range of activities: taxis, alcohol licensing, temporary events, pavement licensing, street trading, animal activities, skin piercing, scrap metal dealers, road closures, to name but a few. Inquiries and complaints related to these licence activities are responded to by officers, and premises visits are carried out as required, including out of hours. Multi-agency enforcement initiatives have been carried out with the police, and that includes the evening test purchase operation for underage alcohol sales in October 22, where 2 premises failed the test, and follow-up action resulted in a change of the designated premises supervisor at 1 premises and a warning and retraining of all staff at the other. Work has also continued this year on updating licensing policy and documents, which this committee has been involved in, street trading, taxi convictions, and finalising the review of the taxi fees and charges, which we've completed tonight. If we look at the work of food and safety and health and safety and environmental health and licensing, the work of this team is included in the service plan that's put to this committee every year, and the current plan was put to the committee in June. The priorities for 2022-23 identified in the plan have been followed, with the focus, as always, being on the activities of greatest risk. For food safety, the largest part of work relates to the food inspection programme for the borough's 700 food businesses, and that continues to be in line with the Food Standard Agency requirements, and investigations have been undertaken in response to complaints, food poisoning and workplace accident notifications. I'm pleased to say that food hygiene standards in the food businesses in the borough remains high, with 98.5% of food businesses being rated satisfactory, good or very good, and customer satisfaction levels with those receiving food and safety visits has been excellent, with 100% saying they had been treated fairly and that the officer was polite, helpful and knowledgeable. Where contraventions of legislation are identified, there's a graduated approach to enforcement, with formal action as a last resort. But formal action has been taken in relation to the voluntary closure of a takeaway and retailer for pest infestations, and hygiene improvement notices have been served for inadequate food safety management systems, inadequate staff training and inadequate supply of running hot water. A significant amount of time has been spent following the investigation of a large food poisoning outbreak in November last year at a local restaurant, which resulted in a hygiene emergency prohibition notice being served, which closed the premises immediately until the Council and the UK Health Security Agency deemed it safe to reopen. Investigations are ongoing with this case with a view to possible further legal proceedings. A programme of proactive food sampling has been carried out of sandwich fillings and environmental swabbing of food preparation services in cafes. And where unsatisfactory results have been found, this has been followed up with the premises concerned. The team has also continued to respond to reports of national food safety incidents, including one regarding potential salmonella contamination in Kinder eggs, and 40 visits were carried out to retailers to ensure the affected batches had been removed from the shelves. The team has been successful this year in bidding for Food Standard Agency grant money to look at the safety of imported food sold in the borough. Visits are being carried out to relevant retailers to gather intelligence on imported food for sale, which to date has identified drinks and baked goods from America that contain prohibited additives and labels on products not in English, which means the customer can't read the allergen information or storage information. A programme of sampling is also underway of foods identified by the Food Standard Agency as preventing emerging risks in relation to imported foods, looking at pesticides and salmonella including imported rice, tea, and enoki mushrooms. All findings and results will be fed back to the FSA to inform import restrictions and shared with Trading Standard colleagues for follow-up with regard to labelling and composition contraventions. Looking at health and safety, a major gas safety project has been carried out this year, looking at the safety of gas cooking appliances in small independent catering establishments. And that has resulted in 30 formal notices being served on unsafe or at-risk gas appliances under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and has identified gas engineers who do not have the appropriate gas safe registration to be working on catering equipment, and these have been reported to Gas Safe. Work is currently being undertaken on ensuring all skin piercing activities in the borough are appropriately registered, and letters have been sent to all close contact businesses, beauty salons, hairdressers, etc., to establish what skin piercing services are being offered to ensure that they're appropriately registered. And also we're looking at intelligence on social media where people are advertising tattooing, electrolysis, microblading, and ensuring that they're registered as well. A new health and safety project is due to get underway in March, which will be looking at external electrical safety in hospitality premises with outside seating areas, as the HSE has identified that as a risk area. The team has also had a busy year in relation to safety at public events, with a large number of Platinum Jubilee events and associated road closures, and also the Surrey Pride event held in the borough in August. Last but not least, pollution control. The main work of this team is the investigation of complaints about noise, light, smoke, rubbish and pest infestations. And the pollution team are able to resolve most complaints informally, but where necessary, nuisance abatement or community protection notices may be served. The team also assess contaminated land sites, respond to land search inquiries and planning, licensing and vehicle operator consultations with regard to the likely polluting impacts. They also carry out the routine air quality monitoring and the permitting of prescribed polluting processes, including dry cleaners, petrol stations, a pet food manufacturer, a mobile crusher and vehicle refinishers. This team also manages the stray dog contract, the pest control treatment contract and the out-of-hours noise contract. Happy to take any questions from members.
Councillor Garrett?
Not a question, a thank you. There's a lot of work that your team does, and I know you obviously engage with lots of different businesses, etc. And I know there's been a few big cases recently, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that on to the team. Thank you.
Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, I was just going to say, presumably there's quite a bit going on for a little date in May that's going to occur as well.
We are updating the website and the applications for any road closures relating to coronation events.
Any further questions? My apologies. Item 8, Licensing Act 2003, Summary of Decisions.
That's me, thank you, Chair. Basically, it's just a summary of decisions that have been made regarding the Licensing Act. Quite self-explanatory, really. So, new personal licences, we've received 10, and this is from the 1st of September 22 to the 31st of January 23. So 10 new personal licences, 9 variations, which would be addresses or name changes to marriage or whatever, 67 temporary event notices, 1 new premises licence, which was for 5 Guys in the atrium, 29 variations to premises licences. These are generally DPS variations, so the designated premises supervisor has changed, moved on. 9 transfer of premises licences where the premises licence holder has changed, so transferred from Mr Smith to Mr Jones. There have been no new club premises certificates and no transfer of club premises certificates. Happy to take any questions?
Now, it is item 9. Draft 2023-24 work programme. Any questions, any points? Councillor Bates?
Yeah, I guess the question is, we've obviously not had any hearings for quite a long time, which has been, I think, a good thing, and obviously demonstrated good decision-making or perhaps a lack of applications. But I couldn't remember if this has been included in the draft training programme for new councillors, but can it be included just because, and it will need to be done fairly early, I suppose, even if there aren't any cases that are upcoming. So I mean, if there is not, because all the policies have been now reviewed, so it may be even, rather than doing an additional training evening, it could possibly be wrapped into one of those meetings. But that would be really, I guess, for the new council to decide. But it just struck me that possibly that could be done rather than asking everyone to come out for 2 evenings instead of 1.
Thank you.
I didn't hear the beginning of the question.
Training.
Yep. There is a date been fixed for training in the first week of June, I believe, and it will be online as previously.
Any other questions? Anything other rates? Well, just before I close the meeting, I'd like to, on behalf of the committee, thank the officers for all the work they do, and it is appreciated. And the documents we get for these meetings, I think, are excellent and help us get through them very quickly. I think so. Thank you all for all your hard